He looked his own daughter in the eyes and said the words no father should ever say. That baby was never my problem. Ryan Mitchell said it with a smile, standing in a doorway he had walked out of the day before Lily was born, and now 11 months later, he had come back. Not for his child. Not to say sorry. He had come back because he smelled money, because a billionaire's name had touched the life of the woman he abandoned, and he wanted his cut. Emily Carter stood frozen with her hungry baby in her arms, and she understood everything. Before we go any further, if this story touches your heart, please take 1 second to subscribe to this channel and follow along all the way to the end, because what happens to Emily and Lily is something you will not want to miss. And do me a favor, tell me in the comments what city you are watching from tonight. I read every single one, and it means the world to me to see just how far this story has traveled. Now let me take you back to the night it all began. At 3 minutes past 10 on a cold Tuesday in Columbus, Ohio, the lights inside a small second-floor apartment flickered once, held on for a heartbeat, and then went dark. Emily Carter did not gasp. She did not curse. She did not even move. She just stood there in the middle of her tiny kitchen, with her hands still resting on the counter, and she let out a breath she felt like she had been holding for months. There was no storm outside. There was no accident down the street. She knew exactly why the lights had gone out, because she had opened the electric bill that morning, read the words "Final Notice" printed in red, and folded it back up and pretended she had not seen them. She had missed the payment, and the power company did not care that she had a 4-month-old daughter sleeping in the next room. The power company did not care about anything. In the darkness, Emily heard the sound that had been the rhythm of her entire life for the past 4 months. Lily was crying. It was a small cry at first, a soft, tired whimper that rose slowly the way it always did until it filled the whole apartment. Emily's body reacted before her mind did. She was already walking toward the bedroom, already reaching out her arms in the dark, her feet finding the familiar path between the couch and the crib without needing any light at all. "I know, baby," she whispered, lifting her daughter against her chest. "I know. Mama's here. Mama's here." But even as she said the words, even as she rocked the tiny body against her shoulder, Emily's stomach twisted because she knew this cry. This was not the cry of a wet diaper. This was not the cry of a bad dream. This was the cry that had been coming more and more often lately, and she was terrified of it because it was the cry of a baby who was hungry. Emily carried Lily back into the kitchen. She reached up onto the shelf where the formula canister sat, and she already knew what she would feel before her fingers even touched it. She had known all day. She lifted it down anyway. She shook it. She heard nothing. She popped off the plastic lid and tipped it toward the faint gray light coming through the window, and she saw the bottom of an empty container, a thin dust of powder that would not have made half a bottle. "No," Emily whispered. "No, no, no." She scraped the sides with the little scoop. She tapped the canister against the edge of the counter to knock loose whatever might be clinging inside. She managed to gather barely enough to make one small, watered-down bottle, and she knew it would buy her maybe an hour, maybe less, and after that, there would be nothing. She sat down slowly at the kitchen table with Lily in one arm and her phone in the other. She opened her banking app. Her thumb hovered over the screen. She did not want to look, but she made herself look because pretending was a luxury she could no longer afford. $9.76. That was it. That was everything Emily Carter had in the world. She stared at the number until it blurred. A container of the formula Lily needed, the special kind for babies with sensitive stomachs, cost more than $30. She could not stretch $9 into $30. She could not conjure food out of nothing. She had already done everything a person could do. She had asked her manager at the hotel for an advance on her paycheck, and he had told her, not unkindly, but firmly, that they did not do that anymore, that too many people had taken advances and quit. She had asked her friend Dana, who had 2 kids of her own, and a husband who had just lost his job, and Dana had cried on the phone and said she wished she could help, but she just did not have it. 2 weeks ago, Emily had walked into a pawn shop with the thin gold necklace her grandmother had given her when she graduated high school. The only thing she owned that meant anything, and she had walked out with $40 and a hole in her chest that had not closed since. There was no one left. She had run out of people the way she had run out of money. Emily looked down at her daughter. Lily had stopped crying for the moment, exhausted, her tiny hand curled against Emily's collarbone, her little chest rising and falling. And looking at that small, trusting face, Emily felt something inside her break open because she had promised this baby everything. She had promised her on the night she was born that she would never go hungry, never be cold, never be afraid. And here they were, in the dark with $9 and an empty can. "I'm sorry," Emily whispered to her sleeping daughter. "I'm so sorry, baby. Mama's trying. I promise Mama's trying." And then, without letting herself think, because if she thought about it, she knew she would stop, Emily opened her messages. She scrolled through her contacts looking for anyone at all she had not already begged. And her thumb stopped on a name she had not thought about in months. It was a contact she had saved by accident back in the winter, after a mix-up with a delivery and number she had typed in wrong and never bothered to fix or delete. In her tired mind in the dark, she was not thinking clearly. She thought it was her sister's old number. Her sister Rachel, who lived 4 states away and never had much either, but who might be able to send her a little something. Emily's fingers were shaking as she typed. "I'm so sorry to bother you. I know how embarrassing this is, and I hate that I even have to ask. But could I possibly borrow $50 for baby formula? My little girl is out, and I don't get paid until Friday. I will pay you back the second I do, I promise. I'm so sorry." She read it over once. Her throat was tight. She hated the person she had become, the person who begged the person who could not even feed her own child. And before she could lose her nerve completely, she pressed send. The little word delivered appeared beneath the message, and only then, only after it was already gone, did Emily's eyes drift up to the name at the top of the screen, and her whole body went cold. It did not say Rachel. It said a name she did not recognize at first, and then in a rush of horror recognized completely. It was not her sister. It was not a friend. It was not anyone she had ever actually spoken to in her life. It was the number she had saved wrong months ago and never deleted. It belonged to a man she had never met. A man whose name had been in the news. A man who was, of all the impossible things in the world, a billionaire. Nathan Whitmore. Emily's hand flew to her mouth. She remembered now in a sickening flood. There had been a delivery mix-up back in the winter, some package meant for a business, and in the confusion, a number had ended up in her phone, attached to a name she had barely registered at the time. Nathan Whitmore, the founder of one of the fastest-growing technology companies in the entire country, a man worth more money than Emily could imagine if she counted every day for the rest of her life. And she had just texted him at 10:15 at night, begging for $50 for baby formula. "Oh my God," Emily breathed. "Oh my God, what did I do?" She stabbed at the screen, trying to unsend the message, trying to delete it, but it was already delivered, already sitting in the phone of a stranger, a rich and powerful stranger, who was probably at this very moment laughing at her, or worse, staring at his phone thinking, what kind of desperate person does this? And then before she could even finish spiraling, 3 little dots appeared at the bottom of the screen. Someone was typing. Emily's heart pounded so hard she could feel it in her ears. She wanted to throw the phone across the room. She wanted the floor to open up and swallow her. She held her breath. A message appeared. "Who is this?" Emily closed her eyes. Her face was burning hot with shame in the cold, dark apartment. Of course he would ask. Of course she would have to explain to a billionaire that she was a stranger begging for money in the middle of the night. She typed with trembling fingers. "I am so sorry. I had the wrong number saved. This was a terrible mistake. Please just ignore it. I am so sorry to have bothered you." She sent it, and then she set the phone face down on the table, and she pressed her hand over her mouth, and she just breathed in and out, trying not to cry, trying to hold herself together because falling apart was another thing she could not afford. Lily stirred against her chest. Emily rocked her gently and stared at the back of the phone and prayed that it would stay silent, that this humiliation would just end, that the man would move on with his enormous important life and forget the pathetic message he had received from a nobody in Ohio. But the phone did not stay silent. It buzzed against the table. Emily did not want to look. She turned it over anyway. "What brand of formula does your baby need?" Emily stared at the words. She read them 3 times. She did not understand them. It was such a strange question, such a specific question, that for a moment her exhausted brain could not process what it meant. Why would he ask that? Why would a billionaire she had texted by accident want to know what kind of formula her baby drank? And then the phone buzzed again and a second message appeared beneath the first, and this one stopped her heart completely. "Send me your address." Emily's hands went cold. Every instinct she had, every warning she had ever heard in her entire life rose up at once inside her chest. Do not trust strangers. Do not give out your address. Do not open your door at night. Especially not to a man you have never met. Especially not when you are alone with a baby. She was a young woman living alone in a city, and here was a strange man, a powerful man, asking where she lived at 10:30 at night. Her mind raced through terrible possibilities. Was this a trap? Was he angry? Did he think she was running some kind of scam? And did he want to come confront her or send someone to confront her? Rich men had lawyers. Rich men had security. Rich men could make a poor woman's life very difficult if they decided she had insulted them. "I can't do that," Emily typed. "I'm sorry, I don't even know you. Please just forget I ever texted you. I made a mistake." The reply came quickly. "You did make a mistake. You texted the wrong person, but your baby is still hungry and that part is not a mistake. Let me help." Emily read those words and something behind her ribs cracked. Because it had been so long, so painfully long since anyone had said the words, "let me help" to her and meant them. She had learned to expect nothing from anyone. She had learned that asking only led to being turned away, to being pitied, to being made to feel small. And here was a total stranger, a man with no reason on earth to care about her, saying, "let me help." But she still could not trust it. She had been let down too many times. Kindness that came too easily always had a price. She had learned that lesson the hard way. "Why would you do that?" she typed. "You don't know me. I could be lying. I could be anyone. Why would you care?" There was a pause, a long one. The three dots appeared and disappeared and appeared again, as if the man on the other end was thinking carefully about how to answer. Then the message came. "Because I remember being hungry, and I remember what it felt like when nobody came. Send me your address or don't. But if you don't, I want you to know I'll be up all night thinking about a baby in Columbus who didn't get fed because her mother was too proud to let a stranger help. Your call." Emily stared at the screen, and in the next room, as if on cue, as if her daughter had heard the whole conversation, Lily began to cry again. It was the weak cry now, the tired cry, the cry of a baby who had been given a watered-down bottle that had not been enough. And that sound, that small, helpless sound, undid every wall Emily had built. Because in the end, it did not matter what happened to her. It did not matter if this was a trap, if this man was dangerous, if she was making the worst decision of her life. All that mattered was that her daughter was hungry, and here was a chance, however strange, however frightening, to fix that. Emily made her choice. With shaking hands, she typed out her address, the apartment number, the street, the complex on the east side of the city with the broken gate and the flickering hallway light. She stared at it for a long moment, and then, before she could talk herself out of it, she pressed send. The reply came almost immediately. "Thank you for trusting me. I'm on my way. It'll be about 40 minutes. What does she need besides formula diapers, anything?" Emily's eyes filled with tears, and this time she could not stop them. They spilled down her cheeks, and she did not even wipe them away. "Just the formula," she typed. "Thank you. I don't know what to say. Thank you." "You don't have to say anything. Keep her warm. I'll be there soon." Emily set the phone down. She wrapped Lily in the softest blanket she had and held her close and rocked her, and she waited, and she did not know what she was waiting for. Part of her still could not believe it was real. Part of her expected the whole thing to fall apart, expected the minutes to tick by, and no one to come, expected to feel the sharp, familiar sting of being disappointed one more time. That was what she was used to. That was what life had taught her. She sat in the dark, and she watched the clock on the wall, the little battery-powered clock that still worked, even when the power did not, and she counted the minutes. 15, 20, 25. Lily fell into a fitful sleep against her chest, worn out from crying. 30 minutes, 35. And then, at almost exactly midnight, Emily heard something that made her freeze. Footsteps in the hallway outside her apartment. Slow, even footsteps coming closer, and then stopping just on the other side of her door. Emily's heart slammed against her ribs. She stood holding Lily tight, and she crept toward the door. She did not open it. She was not that foolish. She rose up onto her toes and pressed her eye to the little peephole, and she looked out into the dim hallway. A man stood there. He was tall. He wore a dark coat over a simple shirt. Nothing flashy, nothing that screamed money. He was alone. There was no security team behind him, no assistant, no black-suited men standing guard. Just one man standing quietly in a run-down hallway at midnight, holding 2 large containers of baby formula in his arms, and something else, a small rectangular object she could not quite make out. Emily kept the chain on the door. She spoke through the gap, her voice tight. "Who is it?" The man's voice came back low and calm. "It's Nathan." Emily swallowed hard. Her hand tightened on the doorframe. "How do I know it's really you? How do I know you're who you say you are?" There was a pause, and then the man said something Emily did not expect at all. He said simply, "You don't." Emily blinked. Of all the answers she had braced herself for, that was not one of them. She had expected him to insist, to argue, to try to convince her, to flash some kind of proof, to be offended that she doubted him. Instead, he just agreed with her. He just said "you don't" as if her caution was the most reasonable thing in the world. "I could show you my ID," Nathan continued through the door. "I could show you my face on my phone next to a news article. But honestly, none of that would prove anything. So I'm not going to try to talk you into trusting me. I'm just going to leave what your daughter needs right here, and then I'm going to step back all the way to the end of the hall. And you can come get it whenever you feel safe. Okay." And then Emily heard the soft sound of the formula containers being set down on the floor just outside her door. She heard his footsteps retreating 1, 2, 3, all the way back down the hall until they stopped. She looked through the peephole again. He had done exactly what he said. He was standing at the far end of the corridor, his hands loose at his sides, giving her all the space in the world. Slowly, carefully, with Lily still cradled in one arm, Emily undid the chain. She turned the lock. She opened the door just a few inches and looked down, and there on the worn carpet sat 2 big canisters of exactly the formula her daughter needed, the special sensitive stomach kind, the expensive kind. And beside them sat the small rectangular object she had seen him holding. It was a portable battery charger, the kind that could keep a phone alive for days. Emily reached down and pulled the formula inside. She looked back up at the man at the end of the hall. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Emily said quietly, "You can come closer, if you want." Nathan walked back slowly, giving her time, and stopped a respectful distance from her door. And for the first time, Emily saw him clearly in the weak light of the hallway. And he was not at all what she had pictured. She had imagined a billionaire would look powerful, polished, untouchable. She had imagined cold eyes and an expensive watch, and the kind of face that had never once worried about a bill. But the man in front of her did not look like that. He looked tired. There were lines around his eyes and a heaviness in his shoulders. He looked like a man who worked too much and slept too little. He looked more than anything like a man who had once known exactly what it felt like to have nothing and had never quite forgotten it. "You really drove all the way out here," Emily said, and her voice cracked a little. "In the middle of the night, because of a text asking for $50. Nathan looked at her, and then his eyes moved down to the small sleeping shape of Lily in her arms, and something in his expression softened. "No," he said. Emily frowned. "No, I didn't drive here because of $50. He met her eyes again. "I drove here because someone needed help, and I could give it. Those are the only 2 things that ever really matter." Emily did not know what to say to that. She had spent so long being invisible, being one more struggling single mother, that the world looked right through that she had forgotten what it felt like to be seen. And this stranger was seeing her, not with pity. That was the thing that undid her most. There was no pity in his face at all, only a kind of quiet respect, as though he understood that a woman who worked double shifts and sold her grandmother's necklace and swallowed her pride to feed her child was not weak. She was the strongest kind of person there was. "Do you want to come in?" Emily heard herself ask, and then immediately, "I'm sorry, the power's out, it's cold, it's a mess. I don't have anything to offer you." "You don't have to offer me anything," Nathan said gently. "But yeah, I'd like to make sure she gets fed before I go, if that's all right with you, only if you're comfortable." Emily stepped back and opened the door. Nathan came inside and he took in the apartment in a single quiet glance. Emily watched him do it, and she braced herself for the flicker of judgment she had seen on so many other faces. She saw him notice the stack of unpaid bills on the counter, the ones she had not been able to hide. She saw him notice the old couch with the tear in the cushion, the empty refrigerator standing open, because the light was out anyway, the single lamp that did not work, the crib pushed against the wall in the corner of the main room because the bedroom was too cold. She saw him take it all in, but there was no judgment in his eyes. There was something else, something that looked almost like recognition, like he had stood in a room like this before a long time ago, in a different life. "Let me warm a bottle," Emily said, moving toward the kitchen. "The stove's gas, so it still works even without power." Nathan set the portable charger on the counter next to the pile of bills. "I brought this too," he said. "Figured your phone was probably running low and you shouldn't be out here with a baby and no way to call anyone." Emily's hand stilled on the bottle. She had not even thought of that. Her phone was down to 12%. If it had died in the night, if Lily had gotten sick, she would have had no way to call for help. This stranger had thought of it before she had. "Why are you being so kind to me?" she asked, and her voice came out smaller than she meant it to. "People aren't kind like this. Not for no reason. There's always a reason. So what's yours?" Nathan leaned against the counter, and for a moment he was quiet. Then he said, "When I was 7 years old, my mom and I got evicted from our apartment in Detroit. We didn't have anywhere to go. We slept in her car for 11 nights. I remember because I counted them." He paused. "One of those nights it was so cold and we were both so hungry, and my mom was trying not to cry so I wouldn't see. And a man knocked on the window. A stranger. He'd seen us sitting there. And he handed my mom a bag of groceries and $40, and he said, 'This isn't charity, it's just what people do.' And then he walked away and we never saw him again, and I never knew his name." Emily had stopped moving entirely. She was staring at him. "I promised myself," Nathan went on quietly, "that if I ever had anything at all to give, I would be that man for someone else. I've kept that promise a lot of times over the years. But most of the time, it's a foundation, a check, a program, something at a distance. It's been a long time since it was just me showing up at somebody's door at midnight the way he showed up at ours." He looked at her. "So no, there's no reason. Or maybe that's the reason. I don't know. But you texted the wrong number tonight, Emily. And I've learned that sometimes the wrong number is exactly the right one." Emily turned back to the stove because she did not want him to see her cry, and she cried anyway, silent tears running down her face as she tested the temperature of the bottle against her wrist. When it was ready, she settled onto the couch and put the bottle to Lily's lips, and the baby, half asleep, latched on and began to drink. Really drink. Not the desperate, frantic sucking of a hungry baby getting a watered-down bottle, but the slow, steady, contented drinking of a baby who was finally getting enough. And Emily watched her daughter's tiny fists, which had been clenched tight for hours, slowly relax, one finger at a time, until Lily's whole little hand lay open and soft against the blanket. And for the first time in weeks, maybe in months, Emily Carter breathed all the way out. Nathan stayed a little while longer. He did not push, he did not pry. He asked a few gentle questions, and mostly he listened, and Emily found herself telling him things she had not told anyone. About the double shifts, about Lily's father who had walked out when she was 5 months pregnant and never once come back to meet his own daughter. About how tired she was, tired in a way that sleep did not fix the kind of tired that lived in your bones. Nathan listened to all of it, and when she was done, he did not offer her a speech. He did not tell her everything would be okay. He just said, "You're doing an incredible job. I hope somebody's told you that, because you are." Nobody had told her that. Not in a very long time. Emily had to look away. When Lily was fed and burped and finally deeply asleep, Nathan stood to go. And before he left, he took a plain white business card out of his coat pocket and set it gently on the counter next to the charger. "My personal cell is on the back," he said. "Not the office, not an assistant, me. If things get bad again, or if you just need anything at all, you call that number, anytime, day or night. I mean that." Emily looked at the card, and then she picked it up and held it out to him, back toward him, shaking her head. "I can't take this," she said. I can't take charity. I know you mean well, but I've got to be able to take care of my own daughter. I can't rely on some stranger to swoop in and fix things. That's not who I want to be." Nathan did not take the card back. He just looked at her, and he shook his head slowly. "It's not charity," he said. "Then what is it?" "It's a reminder." Emily frowned. "A reminder of what?" Nathan was quiet for a second, and then he said the thing that Emily would remember for the rest of her life, the thing she would repeat to herself on the hard nights that were still coming, the thing that would carry her through everything that was about to happen. "That needing help," he said, "doesn't make you weak." And before Emily could answer, before she could argue or thank him, or say anything at all, Nathan Whitmore turned and let himself out, and the door closed softly behind him, and she heard his footsteps fade down the hall. Emily stood alone in her apartment with a sleeping baby and 2 cans of formula and a portable charger and a business card in her hand. And she did not know it yet, but her life had just changed direction completely. She set the card down on the counter. She would keep it. She told herself she would never call it, that she would pay him back the $50 on Friday and that would be the end of it, that she would never impose on this man again. But she would keep the card. Just to remember that once, on the worst night of her life, a stranger had shown up at midnight and treated her not like a burden, but like a person worth driving across a city for. The next morning, the power was still out. Emily had a little money coming Friday, but not enough to turn it back on until the following week. She fed Lily. She got ready for her shift at the hotel, moving on autopilot, exhausted, but somehow lighter than she had felt in ages. And when she glanced at her phone, she saw there was a message waiting from a number she now knew by heart. "Good morning. Hope she slept well. Sending you something. Don't argue. It's not for you. It's for her." Emily's stomach dropped. Don't argue. She did not like the sound of that. She started typing a reply, something about how she really could not accept anything more when a second message came through. It was a confirmation. Her electric bill had been paid, not just the overdue amount. The whole thing, the current balance and the past due, and a credit on top enough to cover the next several months. The power would be back on by that afternoon. Emily sat down hard on the couch. She stared at her phone, and she felt 2 things at war inside her chest. The first was a flood of relief so powerful it made her dizzy, because her baby would be warm, because she would not have to choose between electricity and diapers, because for the first time in longer than she could remember, she was not standing on the very edge of a cliff. But the second thing was fear, because Emily Carter had learned over and over in the hardest possible ways that nothing good came for free, that when things seemed too good to be true, they were. That kindness, this big, this generous, always came with strings she could not yet see. She typed back, "This is too much. I can't accept this. Please, I don't know how I would ever pay you back." And Nathan's reply came simple and steady. "You don't pay me back. Someday when you're on your feet, you find somebody else in the dark and you show up for them. That's how this works. That's the only rule." Emily read it, and she pressed the phone to her chest, and she let herself believe just a little that maybe the world was not only cruel, maybe there was still some good in it. Maybe her luck was finally turning. She was wrong to relax, because at that very moment, several miles across the city, a man Emily had not seen in over a year was scrolling through his phone, and he had just seen a photograph. A grainy photograph taken by a bored neighbor and posted to a local social media group of a black luxury SUV parked outside a run-down apartment complex on the east side at midnight. And someone in the comments had recognized the vehicle, and someone else had recognized the man getting out of it. And a name had started to spread: Nathan Whitmore. Ryan Mitchell sat up straight. He read the comments. He looked at the address in the background of the photo, and slowly a smile spread across his face. Because Ryan knew that apartment complex. He knew exactly who lived on the east side of Columbus in a place like that. He knew the woman he had walked away from when she was pregnant, the woman he had not thought about in months, the woman with the baby he had never bothered to meet. And now it seemed that woman had a billionaire showing up at her door in the middle of the night. Ryan set his phone down on the table. He leaned back in his chair, and he began for the first time in a very long time to think about his daughter. Not because he missed her, not because he wanted to be a father, but because where there was a billionaire, there was money. And where there was money, Ryan Mitchell always found a way to get his hands on some of it. He picked his phone back up. He found Emily's old number, the one he had never deleted the same way she had never deleted his. And he started to type. But then he stopped. No, not a text. A text was too easy to ignore. A text she could delete and pretend she never saw. He would go in person. He would show up at her door wearing his best jacket with his warmest smile, and he would look at the daughter he had abandoned as though he had missed her every single day. And he would find out exactly how close Emily Carter had gotten to Nathan Whitmore. And then he would figure out how to turn it into the thing he had wanted his whole life, a payday. Emily had no idea he was coming. She went to work that morning with hope in her heart for the first time in ages. She cleaned hotel rooms and she smiled at guests, and she thought about the warm apartment waiting for her and her daughter that night, and she thought about the stranger who had reminded her that she was strong. She let herself feel just for a day like maybe the worst was finally behind her. She did not know that the worst had not even started yet. She did not know that her past was already on its way to her door, and she did not know that the man who had abandoned her when she needed him most was about to walk back into her life, not to make things right, but to try to take from her the one thing she had left, her daughter, and with her everything. 2 days later, there was a knock at Emily's door, and when she opened it, holding Lily on her hip, expecting a neighbor or a delivery, she found herself staring into the face of the last man on earth she ever wanted to see again. He was smiling. He was wearing a jacket that cost more than she made in a week, and his eyes moved past her into the apartment, searching until they landed on a plain white business card sitting on the counter. And Ryan Mitchell said in a voice as smooth as oil, "Hey, Em, long time. I heard you've made a real important friend." Emily's blood turned to ice, and in her arms, sensing something her mother could not yet name, baby Lily, began very softly to cry. "Long time, Ryan," Emily said, and her voice did not shake, even though everything inside her was shaking. "What do you want?" Ryan put his hand over his heart like she had wounded him. "What do I want, Em? That's a cold way to greet the father of your child. Can't a man come see his little girl?" "You've never seen her," Emily said. "Not once. She's 11 months old, and you've never held her, never sent a dime, never called to ask if she was alive. So don't stand in my doorway and pretend you came for her." He kept smiling, but the smile had changed. It had gone tight at the corners the way it always used to when he did not get his way. Emily knew that smile. She had lived with that smile for 2 years. It was the smile Ryan wore right before he turned mean. "Can I come in?" he asked. "No. Emily, you're not coming into my home. You lost that right the day you packed your bags while I was 6 months pregnant and told me the baby wasn't your problem." Ryan's eyes flicked past her again into the apartment, and Emily saw exactly where they landed. On the white business card sitting on the kitchen counter next to the portable charger. She saw the moment he read the name printed on it. She saw the flash of something greedy cross his face quick as a snake there, and then gone. "Nathan Whitmore," Ryan said slowly, tasting the words. "Now that is an interesting name to find on your counter, Em. Since when do you run in those circles?" And that was when Emily understood completely. That was the moment the last piece clicked into place. He had not come because he had seen a photo of his daughter. He had not come because some long-buried piece of his conscience had finally woken up. He had come because he had seen a photo of a black SUV and a name and a dollar sign in his mind big enough to blot out everything else. "You saw the picture," Emily said. Her voice was flat. "The one going around. That's why you're here." Ryan spread his hands, dropping the act, because he had never been able to keep it up for long. Okay, you got me. Yeah, I saw it. Whole city's talking about it, Em. Billionaire showing up at some apartment on the east side at midnight. Everybody's wondering who the lucky girl is, and imagine my surprise when I realized it's the mother of my kid." He grinned. "So how about it? You two a thing now?" "He set you up nice, because from where I'm standing, it looks like our little family just came into some serious opportunity." "Get off my step," Emily said. "Come on, don't be like that. I'm just saying we're in this together. That's my daughter in there. Whatever comes your way, half of it's hers, and I'm her father, so we should really sit down and talk about how we're going to handle this." Emily laughed, and there was no humor in it at all. "We. There is no we, Ryan. There never was. You made sure of that." Lily, still on her hip, had started to fuss, picking up on the tension in her mother's body, and Emily instinctively bounced her, soothing her, one hand cradling the back of the baby's head. And Ryan's eyes went to the child, and for 1 second, Emily thought she saw something almost human flicker there, some ghost of recognition. But then it was gone, and it was replaced by calculation, and Emily's stomach turned because she realized he was not looking at Lily like a daughter. He was looking at her like a bargaining chip. "She's got my eyes," Ryan said softly. "Doesn't she?" "Don't," Emily warned. "Don't you dare. I'm just saying she's mine too. You gave that up." "You can't just give up being a father, Em. It doesn't work like that. There's laws. There's rights." He let the words hang there, and the smile came back, and this time it was cold all the way through. A man has rights to his own kid, no matter what happened in the past. Any judge in this state would tell you that. And there it was. The threat dressed up soft, but a threat all the same. Emily felt it land in her chest like a stone dropping into deep water. She held her daughter tighter. "Get off my step," she said again, and this time her voice cracked just slightly, and she hated that it did because she saw him notice. "Think about it," Ryan said, backing away, hands raised, all easy charm again, now that he had planted what he came to plant. "I'll be around. We've got a lot to talk about, you and me, for Lily's sake." He said the baby's name like it was a card he was playing, and it made Emily sick. "Take care, Em. You look good, by the way. Real good. Money agrees with you." And then he turned and walked down the hall, whistling, actually whistling, and Emily stood frozen in her doorway until he was gone, and only then did she close the door and lock it and slide the chain and press her back against it, and slowly, slowly slide down to the floor, still holding Lily, who had gone quiet and was now watching her mother's face with those big, searching eyes. "It's okay, baby," Emily whispered, though she did not believe it. "It's okay. Mama's got you. Mama's not going anywhere, not ever." She sat on the floor for a long time. That night, after Lily was asleep, Emily sat at her kitchen table and stared at the white business card, and she thought about calling the number on the back. Nathan had said any time, day or night, but she did not call, because this was exactly the thing she had been afraid of. She had let a stranger into her life, and now her life was tangling up with his, and here came the strings right on schedule. If she called him now, if she went running to the Billionaire the first time trouble showed up, then everything Ryan had accused her of would be true. She would be the woman using a rich man. And more than that, she would be proving to herself that she could not stand on her own 2 feet. She would be handing away the one thing she still had, her self-respect. So she did not call. She put the card in a drawer, and she went to bed, and she lay awake most of the night listening to her daughter breathe and thinking about the word rights and how a man who had done nothing could still have so much power over her simply because of biology and paperwork. She did not know it, but Ryan was awake too across the city, and he was not thinking about his rights as a father. He was on his phone and he was building something. He was setting a trap, and the trap was made of words, and it was aimed straight at Emily's heart. It started small. Just a post on the same local social media group where the photo of the SUV had appeared. Ryan did not use his own name at first. He created it, careful, worded it just right. He wrote about a friend of a friend, a single mom on the East Side, who he claimed had, quote, latched onto a wealthy older man and was using her baby to reel him in. He wrote that it was a shame the way some women would exploit their own children for a payday. He wrote that the real victim here was the little girl being used as a prop. And the internet, hungry as it always was for a villain, ate it up. By the next morning, the post had been shared over 400 times. By that afternoon, someone had connected it to the photo of the SUV, and someone else had figured out the apartment complex, and someone else had found a picture of Emily from an old work event that a former coworker had tagged her in years ago and pinned it up next to the whole story like evidence. And the comments were a knife. Gold digger, they said. Using a baby to trap a rich man, they said. Disgusting. That poor child, they said. Somebody should call child services. Emily found out at work. She was cleaning a room on the 4th floor of the hotel, her cart parked in the hallway when her phone buzzed and buzzed again, and then would not stop. She stepped out and looked at it, and saw dozens of notifications messages from people she barely knew, tags and posts she did not understand, and it took her a full minute of scrolling to piece together what was happening, and when she did, she had to grab the edge of the cart to keep her knees from giving out. There was her face, her real name. Her daughter referred to in 100 comments by strangers who had decided they knew exactly who Emily Carter was, and exactly what kind of mother she was, without ever having met her, without knowing a single true thing about her life. And she knew instantly who had done it. Her manager found her 20 minutes later, still standing in the hallway, staring at her phone. "Emily," he said, and his voice was uncomfortable in a way she had never heard from him. "Can you come to the office when you get a minute?" In the office, he would not quite look at her. He told her that guests had complained, that someone had recognized her from the internet, that the hotel had a reputation to think about, and that maybe it would be best if she took a few days off unpaid until, as he put it, this all blows over. "It's not true," Emily said. "None of it is true. He's lying about me. My ex is lying about me." "I believe you," her manager said, and maybe he even did. "But it's not about what I believe. It's about the guests. I'm sorry, Emily. Take the week. Let's see where things stand." Emily walked out of that hotel with her stomach hollowed out and her hands shaking, because a week without pay was a week she could not survive, billionaire or no billionaire. And because the whole city apparently now believed she was a monster, and because the man who had done this to her was the same man who had abandoned her, and he had done it on purpose, and she understood exactly why. He was squeezing her. He was making her life unbearable, so that when he came back with his offer, whatever it was, she would be too broken to say no. She did not call Nathan. She wanted to. Every instinct in her exhausted, frightened body was screaming at her to call the one person who had shown her kindness. But she did not, because she could still hear the comments in her head using a baby to trap a rich man, and she could not, she would not become that. So she went home, and she picked up Lily from the neighbor who watched her during shifts, an older woman named Mrs. Alvarez, who had been kind to Emily, and Emily braced herself for the woman to have seen the posts too, to look at her differently. But Mrs. Alvarez just handed Lily over and squeezed Emily's arm and said, "I don't believe a word of it, mija, not one word. I've watched you with that baby for a year. I know a good mother when I see one." And Emily nearly broke down right there in the doorway, because it was the first kind thing anyone outside had said to her all day. That night, Emily's phone rang, and it was not Nathan, it was Ryan. She almost did not answer, but she was afraid not to, afraid of what he might do next, so she picked up. "Hey, Em," he said, warm as ever, like he had not just torched her entire life. "How you holding up?" "You did this," Emily said. "You know you did this." "Did what? I don't know what you're talking about." "But hey, I did see some stuff online. People can be so cruel, huh? It's really unfair what they're saying about you." He tisked, and Emily wanted to reach through the phone and strangle him. "You know it doesn't have to be like this. All this noise, all this drama. We could make it all go away real easy. You and me, we sit down, we figure out a fair arrangement, and I make sure all those nasty posts disappear. I've got some pull in those groups. I could make you the victim instead of the villain, just like that." She could hear the snap of his fingers. "All you gotta do is be reasonable." "What do you want, Ryan?" Emily said, dead tired, done playing. "I want what's fair. I want to be part of my daughter's life. And I want, for our family to share in the good fortune that's come your way. That's all. A little support, something to make up for lost time. And in exchange, all this ugliness stops, and you and Lily go back to your quiet little life. Everybody wins." "You want me to pay you," Emily said slowly, "to leave me alone." "I want us to come to an understanding," Ryan said smoothly. "And Em, I'd think hard about it if I were you. Because if we can't come to an understanding, then I've got no choice but to fight for my rights as a father. And a judge is going to look at all this. The internet stuff, your finances. You just lost your job, didn't you?" "Yeah, I heard about that too." Emily's blood ran cold because she had told no one. He was watching her that closely. A judge is going to look at an unemployed single mom with a bad reputation online versus a father who's ready to step up and provide. And I gotta tell you, honey, that's not going to go the way you want. And there it was. The real threat finally out in the open. Not money, or not only money, Lily. He was threatening to take her daughter. Emily hung up the phone. She sat in the dark, and for the first time since Nathan Whitmore had knocked on her door, she felt the hope she had let herself feel drained completely out of her, replaced by a terror so cold and so total she could barely breathe. Because Ryan was not entirely wrong. That was the horror of it. She had just lost her job. She did have a wrecked reputation online. She was barely scraping by. And in a custody fight, none of what she knew in her heart, that she loved her daughter more than her own life, that she had sacrificed everything for her, that Ryan had never so much as sent a birthday card. None of it might matter as much as the cold, hard facts of money and stability and appearances. She could lose Lily. The thought was a physical pain, a hand around her throat. And in that moment alone and terrified, Emily almost gave in. She almost called Ryan back and asked how much. She almost decided that if paying him off was the only way to keep her daughter safe, then she would find the money. Somehow she would go back to Nathan and beg she would do anything at all. But then she went into the bedroom and she looked at Lily asleep in the crib, one tiny arm thrown up over her head, her chest rising and falling, so small and so trusting and so completely hers. And something inside Emily hardened into steel. No. She would not teach her daughter that you could buy off a bully. She would not teach her that fear won. She would not spend the rest of her life paying a man who had abandoned them, watching him come back again and again with his hand out, always threatening, always squeezing, treating their child like a lottery ticket he could cash whenever he ran short. That was not a life. That was a slow death, and it would poison everything. She would fight him, somehow. She did not know how. She had no money and no job and no lawyer and a city that thought she was a villain. But she would fight him because the alternative was losing Lily either way, either to his custody or to a lifetime of blackmail. And if she was going to lose everything, she would lose it standing up, not on her knees. And that decision, once she made it, changed the way she saw the phone in her hand. Because there was one person in the world who had told her that needing help did not make her weak. One person who had reminded her that showing up for someone was the only thing that mattered. And she realized, sitting there in the dark, that the reason she had not called him was pride, and that pride was a luxury, and that a mother fighting for her child could not afford luxuries. But she still did not call to ask for money. That was the line she would not cross. She would never let anyone say she had used Nathan Whitmore for $1. Instead, she picked up the phone, and her hands were steady now, and she typed something different. Just one line. My ex found out about you. He's trying to take Lily. I'm not asking you for money. I would never ask you for that. I just didn't have anyone else to tell. I'm scared. She stared at it for a long moment, and then she sent it. The reply came in less than a minute. The phone rang in her hand. Nathan's number. She answered. She did not say hello. She just held the phone to her ear and breathed. Are you okay? His voice was low and immediate and completely focused, and it did something to her, that voice. It steadied her like a hand on the back. No, Emily whispered. I'm not okay. They think I used you. The whole city thinks I'm some gold digger who's using my baby to get to you. I lost my job today. And Ryan, that's my ex. He did all of it. He planted the posts, and now he's threatening to take Lily. Unless I pay him, and if I don't pay him, he says he'll fight me for custody and he might win, Nathan. He might actually win, because I've got nothing, and he's got a story that makes me look terrible, and I don't know what to do. There was a silence on the line, and then Nathan said something that surprised her. I already know. Emily blinked. What? I saw the post this morning. I have people who watch for my name coming up online. It flagged the whole thing hours ago. A pause. I've been sitting here all day, Emily, wanting to call you. But I didn't. You want to know why I didn't? Why? Because I figured you'd think I only called to protect myself, to do damage control. And I didn't want you to think that, because that's not why. I was waiting for you. I wanted it to be your choice to reach out. And I'm real glad you did. Emily closed her eyes. The tears came again, but they were different tears this time. Why aren't you angry? She asked. People are saying awful things about you, too. That you're some rich guy taking advantage of a struggling girl, or that you're being played for a fool. It's all over the internet, and you're not angry. No, Nathan said simply. Why not? Because I know the truth. His voice did not waver. I know what happened in that apartment. I know you tried to give the card back. I know you argued with me about the electric bill. I know you're the kind of person who'd rather go hungry than take something she didn't earn. I was there, Emily. I saw who you are with my own eyes. So I don't care what a bunch of strangers on the internet decided, because they weren't in that room and I was. Let them talk. The truth doesn't need me to be angry. It just needs me to remember it. And Emily, sitting alone in the dark with her sleeping daughter and her wrecked life, and her terror, felt something she had not felt in longer than she could remember. She felt like she was not alone. I don't want your money, she said again, because she needed him to understand, needed to say it out loud. I mean it. I'll never take money from you to fight him. If I did that, then everything they're saying about me would be true, and I couldn't live with that. I couldn't look my daughter in the eye. Do you understand? And here was the thing that made Emily's chest ache, the thing she had not expected. Nathan did not argue. He did not tell her she was being foolish, that pride was a luxury, that of course he would just handle it, that he could make Ryan disappear with a phone call and a checkbook. A different man would have. A different man would have insisted on rescuing her, would have made her feel small and grateful and indebted all over again. Nathan just said, I understand, and I respect it more than you know. You do? Yeah, I do. Because you're right. If I just throw money at this, if I hire the biggest lawyer in the state and steamroll your ex and make it all go away, then what happens? You spend the rest of your life feeling like you didn't do it, like it was done for you. And that man, he'll always know he can come back because he'll figure there's a rich guy standing behind you who'll pay to make problems disappear. Money doesn't fix a man like that. It feeds him. A pause. No. If we do this, we do it different. We do it so that when it's over, everybody knows, including you, especially you, that you won it. Not me. Emily was crying openly now, quietly, so as not to wake the baby. But I don't know how to do that. I don't have anything. I don't even have a lawyer. I don't know how any of this works. I'm a hotel housekeeper, Nathan. I clean rooms. How am I supposed to fight a man who's already made the whole city hate me? You're not going to fight him alone, Nathan said. That's the difference between what you're afraid of and what's actually true. You think the only two choices are you fight alone and lose, or I swoop in and rescue you and you owe me forever. But there's a third way, and it's the way that man showed up for me and my mom in that parking lot all those years ago. He didn't take my mom's problems away from her. He gave her enough to get through the night, and then he stepped back and let her keep being the mother. He stood beside her. He didn't stand in front of her. You see the difference? Emily wiped her face. Beside me, not in front of me. Beside you, Nathan said. That's all I'm offering. Not a rescue, a partner, somebody in your corner. You do the fighting, you make the choices. It stays your life, your daughter, your victory. I'm just going to make sure you're not doing it with your hands tied behind your back. Can you accept that? Because that's not charity, Emily. That's just what people are supposed to do for each other. And Emily, who had spent her whole life learning that no one would ever stand beside her, that everyone would either walk away like Ryan or look down at her with pity, sat in the dark and understood finally that she had misjudged this man completely. He was not trying to save her. Saving her would have been easy for him, would have cost him nothing but money, and would have quietly taken away the last of her dignity. What he was offering was so much harder and so much rarer. He was offering to believe that she was strong enough to save herself and to make sure she got the chance to prove it. Okay, she whispered. Okay, beside me, I can accept that. Good, Nathan said, and she could hear something ease in his voice, some tension she had not known was there. Then here's what happens next. First thing tomorrow, you're not going to answer any more of his calls. Not one. Anything he says to you, he can say to a lawyer. Second, that neighbor of yours, the one who watches Lily and your manager, who felt bad about letting you go, and anybody else who knows the real you, we're going to need them. Because the way you beat a lie, Emily, is not with money. It's with the truth from people who were actually there. And you've got the truth on your side. He doesn't. He's got a story he made up. Stories fall apart. The truth doesn't. And what about you? Emily asked. What's your part in this? There was a pause, and when Nathan spoke again, there was steel in his voice that she had not heard before, a hardness that reminded her that this quiet, kind man had built one of the largest companies in the country from nothing, and had not done it by being soft. "My part," he said, "is making sure that when a man like Ryan Mitchell tries to use a child as a bargaining chip, he learns real fast that he picked the wrong child and the wrong mother and the wrong week to do it." A beat. But that part happens quietly, and it happens legal, and it happens in a courtroom where the truth gets to speak. You just focus on Lily. Let me worry about making sure the fight is fair. Can you sleep tonight? "I don't know," Emily admitted. "Try, because tomorrow everything changes. Tonight you were somebody alone and scared. Tomorrow you're somebody with a plan and people in her corner. That's a different thing, Emily. That's a whole different thing." They talked a little longer, and then they hung up, and Emily lay down on her bed, still in her clothes, and for the first time she did not lie awake in terror. She was still afraid. Of course she was still afraid. But underneath the fear, for the first time, there was something solid to stand on. She was not alone. And whatever came, she would meet it on her feet. She fell asleep faster than she had in months. Across the city, Ryan Mitchell was not sleeping. He was pacing his apartment phone in hand, waiting for a text back from Emily that was not coming. He had expected her to fold by now. He had expected panic tears, a desperate call asking how much he wanted. That was how it always went with Emily. She was soft. She was scared. She always caved. But the phone stayed silent. Hours passed, and Emily did not call, and did not text, and did not beg. And that silence unsettled Ryan more than any argument would have, because it was new, because it did not fit the woman he thought he knew. He did not understand it. He could not understand it because Ryan Mitchell had never in his life stood beside anyone, and so he could not imagine what it did to a person, what it changed in them when for the first time somebody stood beside them. He told himself it did not matter. He told himself she would cave eventually, that everyone did, that he just needed to squeeze harder. So he made a decision. If she would not come to him, he would force her hand. He would stop threatening a custody fight and start one. He would file. Papers, real papers, from a real lawyer, the aggressive kind he had found, who took cases on the promise of a cut of whatever came out of them. He would make Emily sit across a courtroom and watch him ask a judge to take her daughter away, and he would let her feel exactly how much she stood to lose until she was ready to pay any price to make it stop. He did not know that Emily was done paying prices. He did not know about the phone call in the dark, or the word beside, or the steel that had gone into a frightened woman's spine. He did not know that the quiet man who had shown up at midnight with 2 cans of formula had already that very night made 3 phone calls of his own, and that one of them was to the best family attorney in the state of Ohio, a woman named Diane Foster, who did not lose and who had listened to Nathan lay out the whole situation and then said in a voice as dry as bone, "So let me make sure I understand. A man who abandoned a pregnant woman, never paid a cent of support, never met the child, defamed the mother online to extort her, and is now weaponizing custody for money. And he's got it in writing on social media under an account we can trace." A pause. "Mr. Whitmore, I don't usually say this, but this is going to be a pleasure." Ryan filed his papers on a Thursday, feeling powerful, feeling certain, imagining Emily's face when she was served. What he did not imagine, what he could not have imagined, was that when the process server knocked on Emily's door and handed her the thick envelope with the court seal on it, Emily Carter would not crumble. She would take the envelope in her steady hands. She would read every page, and then she would pick up her phone, and instead of calling Ryan to surrender, she would call a woman named Diane Foster, whose number Nathan had given her, and she would say in a voice that did not shake at all, "He filed. I'm ready. Tell me what I need to do." And on the other end of the line, Diane Foster would smile and say, "Good. Now let's talk about everything he doesn't know we know." Because Ryan had made one fatal mistake, the same mistake that men like him always made. He had looked at Emily Carter and seen a soft, scared, easily frightened girl who would break the moment he pushed hard enough. He had never once considered that the woman who had worked double shifts while pregnant, who had raised a baby alone with nothing, who had sold her grandmother's necklace and swallowed her pride and done whatever it took to keep her daughter fed, was not soft at all. She was the hardest, strongest thing he had ever underestimated in his life, and he was about to find out. Diane Foster's office was on the 11th floor of a downtown building, and Emily almost did not go in. She stood on the sidewalk outside with Lily bundled against her chest, looking up at the glass and the polished stone, and every old feeling rose up in her at once. She did not belong in a place like that. Women like her did not walk into offices like that. Women like her got walked out of them. But then she thought about the word Nathan had given her. Beside, not in front of. And she thought about the thick envelope with the court seal that was sitting on her kitchen table right now. And she thought about the sound of her daughter breathing in the dark, and she made herself walk through the doors. Diane Foster turned out to be a small, sharp woman in her 60s, with reading glasses pushed up into gray hair and a handshake like a car door slamming. She did not offer Emily pity. She did not offer her tea and a soft voice. She sat Emily down across a wide desk, looked at her over the top of her glasses and said, "I've read what he filed. Now I want to hear it from you. All of it. Start at the day you met him and don't leave anything out and don't make yourself look better than you were. I need the truth, warts and all, because I promise you, his lawyer is going to go digging for every wart you've got, and I would rather find them first." So Emily told her everything. She told her about meeting Ryan when she was 23, about how charming he had been, how he had made her feel like the center of the world, right up until she got pregnant, and then how the charm had turned to coldness and the coldness to cruelty, and how he had packed a bag one night when she was 6 months along and told her the baby was not his problem and walked out and never came back. She told her about the double shifts, the borrowed money, the necklace she had pawned. She told her about the night the power went out and the empty formula can and the wrong number. And when she got to Nathan, she stopped because this was the part she was afraid of. "Go on," Diane said. "This is the part that makes me look bad," Emily said quietly. "This is the part everyone's going to use against me. I texted a billionaire by mistake, and he came to my apartment, and he paid my electric bill, and now the whole city thinks I'm—" She could not even say it. Diane held up a hand. "Stop. Let me tell you something, and I want you to hear it, because it's going to matter more than you think." She leaned forward. "There is nothing shameful about accepting help when your child is hungry. Nothing. Not legally, not morally, not any other way. The shame in this story does not belong to you. It belongs to the man who left, and it belongs to the man who came sniffing around the second he smelled money. You did not do a single thing wrong by feeding your daughter. Do you understand me? Now I need you to stop apologizing for it, because if you sit in that witness chair, apologizing for keeping your baby alive, we will lose. And I do not lose." Emily stared at her. "Say it back to me," Diane said. "Say what? That you didn't do anything wrong." Emily's throat closed. It was such a simple thing, and it was the hardest thing anyone had ever asked her to say. "I didn't do anything wrong," she managed, and her voice broke on the last word, and Diane Foster's face softened just slightly for just a second. "Good," the lawyer said. "Hold on to that, because now I'm going to tell you what your ex-husband did wrong, and it is a very, very long list." Over the next hour, Diane laid it out, and as she did, Emily felt the ground shifting under her, felt the fear that had been sitting on her chest for days begin slowly to lift. Because it turned out that Ryan, in his greed and his arrogance, had made mistake after mistake after mistake, and every one of them was a weapon now, and every one of them pointed back at him. The posts, first of all. Ryan had thought he was clever hiding behind an anonymous account, but Diane had already had someone look into it, and the account traced back through a couple of lazy steps Ryan had never bothered to cover to an email address that was unmistakably his. The defamation was in writing. The extortion was practically in writing, too, all those messages where he had offered to make the posts disappear if Emily would be reasonable. Emily still had every one of them on her phone. She had never deleted a single message the same way she had never deleted the wrong number that had brought Nathan to her door. "You kept these," Diane said, scrolling through screenshots on a tablet, and there was something almost like wonder in her dry voice. "You kept all of them." "I keep everything," Emily said. "I always have. When you've got nobody to back you up, you learn to keep the receipts. It's the only proof you've got that things happened the way you say they did. Diane looked at her for a long moment. "Emily," she said, "that habit is about to win you your daughter." And then there was the money. Or rather, the total absence of it. In 11 months, in nearly 2 years, counting the pregnancy, Ryan had never paid $1 of support. Not one. There was no record of a single payment because there had never been a single payment. Emily had the birth records showing he had not been present. She had the hospital paperwork. She had the whole timeline of his absence, and it was airtight because a man cannot fake having been there for a child he was never there for. "Here is what your ex-husband does not understand," Diane said, taking off her glasses and setting them down. "He thinks this is a fight about who has more money. He thinks because Mr. Whitmore paid an electric bill that makes you look like a kept woman, and because he's now claiming he can provide, that makes him look like the responsible parent. That's the story he's telling. But courts don't decide custody based on who has the fatter bank account, especially not when the richer party abandoned the child. Courts decide based on the best interest of the child and on the conduct of the parents. And when you line up your conduct against his conduct side by side, it isn't close. It isn't remotely close. You have spent 11 months feeding, clothing, sheltering, and loving that little girl through the hardest circumstances imaginable. He has spent 11 months not existing, and then showed up to extort you the day a rich man's name got attached to yours. A judge is going to see that. I am going to make sure a judge sees that. Emily was crying again, but the tears felt different now, lighter, almost like relief. "So, we can win." Diane put her glasses back on. "We don't say win in the first meeting, but I'll tell you this. I've been doing this 31 years, and in 31 years, I have rarely wanted to beat someone as badly as I want to beat Ryan Mitchell, so let's just say I like our chances and I like them a lot." That night, Emily called Nathan and told him about the meeting, and she could hear him smiling on the other end. "She's good, isn't she?" he said. "She's terrifying," Emily said, "in the best possible way." "That's why I called her." A pause. "How are you feeling?" Emily thought about it. "Scared still, but less alone. Which I think is the whole thing you were trying to tell me." "That's the whole thing," Nathan agreed. But even as her legal footing got stronger, Ryan was not done. He did not know yet how much trouble he was in. All he knew was that Emily had gotten a lawyer, a good one, which meant somebody was paying for it, which meant the billionaire was involved, which to Ryan just confirmed that there was money in this big money, and it made him push harder instead of backing off. He escalated. He went back to the internet, and this time he was not careful because he was angry now, and anger makes men stupid. He posted again under his real name this time, casting himself as the heartbroken father being kept from his little girl by a cruel, gold-digging mother and her billionaire boyfriend. He gave interviews to a couple of those local gossip pages that would run anything. He cried on camera in a video that got tens of thousands of views, talking about how all he wanted was to hold his daughter, how his heart was breaking, how he just wanted to be a dad. And here was the terrible thing. It worked at first. People believed him. The comments turned again harder this time against Emily. Somebody found out where Mrs. Alvarez lived and left a nasty note. Somebody called the hotel where Emily used to work and got her name mentioned on a local radio show. For about a week, the whole weight of public opinion came crashing down on a woman who had done nothing but keep her baby alive, and it was crushing. And there were nights Emily sat on her kitchen floor and shook. But something had changed in her, because a week earlier that pressure would have broken her. A week earlier, she would have called Ryan and asked how much. But now, every time she felt herself start to buckle, she remembered Diane Foster leaning across the desk saying, "You didn't do anything wrong." And she remembered Nathan saying, "Beside you, not in front of you." And she remembered the receipts, all those messages saved on her phone, all that proof, and she held on. And there was a moment right in the middle of the worst of it that Emily would remember for the rest of her life. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and she was at the lowest she had been sitting on the floor with Lily, and her phone would not stop buzzing with cruelty, and she was one bad message away from giving up. And then there was a knock at the door, and she flinched because knocks at the door had stopped being good things. But when she looked through the peephole, it was Mrs. Alvarez, And behind Mrs. Alvarez was another neighbor, a young mother from the second floor. And behind her was an older man from the building Emily had barely ever spoken to. And behind him were two more people. Emily opened the door, confused, and Mrs. Alvarez, holding a covered dish, said, "We saw the things they're saying about you, mija. And we came to tell you we don't believe any of it. We know you. We've watched you. And a few of us got to talking, and we thought if the whole internet is going to lie about our Emily, then the people who actually know the truth ought to stand up and say so." And one by one they came in, these neighbors Emily had lived beside for a year and barely known, and they sat in her small apartment, and they told her they had her back. The young mother from the second floor had recorded a video on her phone talking about the Emily she knew, the one who shared diapers, when someone ran out, who watched other people's kids in a pinch, who never once had a harsh word for anyone. The older man had written down in careful handwriting an account of the times he had seen Ryan's car outside years ago, and then, never again, of how he had watched Emily struggle alone. They had brought food, they had brought their names, they had brought the truth. Emily broke down completely right there in front of all of them, and Mrs. Alvarez just held her and patted her back and said, there now. You are not alone, mija. You were never as alone as you thought." And that, more than any lawyer, more than any billionaire, was the thing that put the steel back in Emily's spine for good, because she understood something in that moment that she had gotten wrong her whole life. She had believed that she was alone, that nobody cared, that the world was cruel, and you fought your battles by yourself, or you lost them. And it was not true. It had never been true. She had been so busy surviving, so braced against disappointment, so proud, that she had never let anyone close enough to prove otherwise. And now, at the very bottom, they were proving it. The kindness had been there all along. She had just been too afraid to reach for it. She called Diane the next morning and told her about the neighbors, about the videos, about the written accounts. And Diane, who was not a woman given to emotion, was quiet for a moment on the phone, and then she said, "Emily, do you understand what you just handed me? Character witnesses, real ones, neighbors with no financial stake, no billionaire connection, nothing to gain, who watched this whole thing happen with their own eyes and are willing to say so under oath. Ryan's out there buying sympathy from strangers on the internet who've never met either of you. You've got the people who were actually there, in a courtroom that is worth more than every share and every crying video he can manufacture. He is building a house out of lies, and you are building one out of witnesses. Guess which one stands up when the wind blows?" And then Diane paused, and her voice changed, took on an edge of something Emily had not heard before, something almost like anticipation. "There's something else," she said. "Something I've been waiting to tell you until I was sure. My investigator finished tracking down a few things, and Emily, your ex-husband, has been lying about more than just you." Emily's heart began to pound. "What do you mean?" "I mean, Ryan Mitchell has been telling the court in sworn filings that he is financially stable and prepared to provide a good home for Lily. That's the whole basis of his case, that he can offer her something you can't. But that's not true. It's not remotely true. The man is drowning in debt. He owes money all over this city, and it gets better." Emily could hear papers shuffling. "The lawyer he hired, the aggressive one who took the case on contingency, they didn't take it because Ryan has a strong case. They took it because they smelled the billionaire same as Ryan did. They're betting that Mr. Whitmore will pay to make this go away. This entire custody filing, Emily, was never about Lily at all. It's a shakedown, and I can prove it." Emily sat down slowly. "How?" "Because Ryan is not smart, and neither is his lawyer, and they've been putting things in writing. Emails, messages. There's a paper trail of him discussing this case as and I'm quoting a message my investigator obtained, quote, easy payday if the rich guy folds, unquote. He referred to his own daughter in writing as a payday." Diane's voice had gone cold and hard as iron. "Emily, when I put that in front of a judge, this case is over. Not just over. It's the kind of over where I start thinking about whether we go after him for the defamation on top of it." Emily could barely speak. "He wrote that. He actually wrote that down." "Men like Ryan always write it down," Diane said. "Because men like Ryan never once imagine they'll get caught. They're so sure everyone else is as easily fooled as the people they've fooled before. He looked at you and saw somebody he could roll right over the way he did when he left you pregnant. He never stopped to think that the woman who survived that might have gotten stronger, not weaker. That's his mistake. That's always their mistake. They confuse a person's patience for weakness right up until the moment it isn't. That night, Emily told Nathan everything, and for the first time in the whole ordeal, she heard real anger in his voice. Not loud anger, something quieter and much colder. He called her a payday, Nathan said. In writing, Emily said, to his lawyer. Nathan was silent for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was very even, very controlled. The voice of a man who had learned a long time ago that the coldest anger is the most useful kind. You know, he said, I've spent a lot of years trying not to become a person who uses power like a weapon. My mother raised me better than that. That man in the parking lot, he didn't use power, he used kindness. And I've tried to live by that. A pause. But I'll tell you, Emily, there's a part of me right now that would like nothing more than to make Ryan Mitchell's life very, very difficult. Legally. Completely legally. I could do it in an afternoon. But you're not going to, Emily said. It was not quite a question. No, Nathan said, and she heard him let out a breath. No, I'm not. Because that's not what this is about, and it never was. If I bury him under my money and my lawyers, then it's my win, not yours. And you deserve to win this one yourself. You deserve to sit in that courtroom and watch the truth take him apart, and know that it was your daughter's mother who did it, not some rich man standing behind her. Diane doesn't need my money to beat him. She's got the truth, and you gave her the receipts, and that's enough. That's more than enough. A pause. But I'll be there. In the back of the room, not saying a word, just so you know you're not alone when you look up. Emily closed her eyes. Beside me. Beside you, Nathan said. Always beside you, never in front. The court date was set for a Monday, 3 weeks out. And in those 3 weeks, Emily did something she had not done in years. She stopped being afraid. She did not stop worrying exactly. There was still so much at stake, everything at stake, the only thing that mattered in her whole world. But the paralyzing breath-stealing terror that had lived in her chest since the day Ryan appeared in her doorway, that was gone, and in its place was something harder and steadier. Resolve. She had a case. She had a lawyer who did not lose. She had neighbors who would stand up for her and the truth on her side, and every receipt she had ever kept, and a man in her corner who had taught her the difference between being rescued and being backed up. And Ryan, meanwhile, had no idea what was coming. He was still out there giving his sad interview, still playing the heartbroken father, still certain that any day now the billionaire would call his lawyer and offer a settlement to make the whole embarrassing thing disappear. He was so sure. He had it all figured out. He would get his payday, get out of debt, and go on his way, and he would never have to actually be a father to anyone, which was the last thing on earth he wanted. He called Emily one more time the week before court. She almost did not answer, but Diane had told her to keep answering. Keep letting him talk. Keep saving everything, because every word out of his mouth was another nail. So she picked up, and she said nothing, and she let him hang himself. He said, and he had dropped the sad father act entirely now, because it was just the two of them. Come on, this is getting expensive for everybody. Let's just settle this like adults. You talk to your boyfriend. He writes a check, I drop the custody thing. Everybody's happy. Nobody actually wants to go to court, right? Court's a mess. Court's expensive. Let's be smart. You want money, Emily said, keeping her voice flat, letting him fill the silence. I want what's fair. I want to be compensated for what, Ryan? For a daughter you never met, what exactly are you being compensated for? And Ryan, arrogant certain, never once imagining the phone was capturing every syllable. Never once imagining Diane Foster would play it in a courtroom, said the words that would end his case before it even started. For my leverage, Em. That's what a custody claim is. It's leverage. You've got a billionaire and a baby, and I've got a claim on the baby, and that's worth money, and we both know it. So let's stop pretending this is about anything else and talk numbers. How much is your rich boyfriend willing to pay to make me go away? Emily was quiet for a moment, and then she said very calmly, Thank you, Ryan. Thank you for what? For finally saying it out loud. And she hung up, And she saved the recording. And she sent it to Diane Foster with a single line of text. "He just called Lily Leverage, it's all here." And Diane Foster texted back one word: "Beautiful." The night before court, Emily could not sleep, but not from fear. She sat up in the dark, holding Lily long after the baby had drifted off, and she looked at her daughter's face, and she thought about the whole long road that had led to this. The husband who walked out, the empty formula can, the wrong number. The stranger at midnight who had shown her that the world was not only cruel, the neighbors who had stood up, the lawyer who did not lose. All of it, every piece, had led to tomorrow. And she made herself a promise, holding her sleeping child in the dark. Whatever happened in that courtroom, however it went, Lily would grow up knowing that her mother had not run, had not folded, had not paid a bully to go away. That when the world came for what mattered most, her mother had stood up on her own 2 feet and fought, and had let the good people who loved her stand beside her while she did it. That was the inheritance Emily wanted to leave her daughter. Not money, not safety bought with someone else's checkbook. Something better than that. The knowledge that she came from someone who did not break. She thought about calling Nathan, but it was late, and instead she just sent a text. "Tomorrow, I find out if I keep her. I'm not going to lie, I'm scared. But I'm not scared the way I was that first night. Thank you for the formula, for the card, for teaching me the difference between being saved and being backed up. Whatever happens tomorrow, I'll never forget it." And Nathan, who was also awake, also unable to sleep, texted back, "You're going to keep her. The truth is on your side, and so are a lot of people, and so am I. Get some rest. Tomorrow, you show your daughter what her mother is made of. I already know. Tomorrow, the whole room finds out." Emily set down the phone. She laid Lily gently in the crib, and she looked at the clock, and it was past midnight, the same hour when a black SUV had once pulled up outside her building and changed everything. And she thought about how strange it was, how a single wrong number, a single act of kindness, a single choice to open a door had brought her all the way here to the edge of the fight of her life. And in a few hours, in a quiet courtroom across the city, Ryan Mitchell would walk in wearing his best jacket and his most wounded expression, certain he was about to get paid. And he would have no idea, none at all, that everything he had ever said, every lie, every threat, every time he had called his own daughter a payday and leverage, and a problem had been written down, recorded, and saved by a woman he had made the fatal mistake of believing was weak. The truth was coming for him. And Emily Carter was going to be the one holding it. At 8:45 on Monday morning, Emily Carter walked into the courthouse holding Lily in her arms, and Ryan Mitchell was already there, and he was smiling. He was wearing the expensive jacket. He had a lawyer beside him, a slick man in an even more expensive suit, and the two of them were leaning close, murmuring confident. And when Ryan saw Emily come through the doors, he actually gave her a little nod, a small knowing nod, as if to say, "Last chance, Em, we could still make a deal. Why are you doing this the hard way?" And Emily looked right back at him, and she did not nod, and she did not look away, and she did not look afraid. And she saw the first flicker of uncertainty cross his face, because this was not the woman he had left pregnant. This was not the woman he thought he could roll right over. Diane Foster met her at the door of the courtroom, took one look at Lily and said, "Good, bring her. Let the judge see the child this whole thing is supposedly about. Let her see who's actually holding her." Then she put a hand on Emily's shoulder, just for a second, and said, "Remember what we talked about. You don't apologize, you don't shrink. You keep your chin up and you tell the truth and you let me do the fighting. Today you just have to be exactly who you already are. Can you do that?" "I can do that," Emily said. And in the back row of the courtroom, quietly, in a plain dark coat, having slipped in without a word to anyone, sat Nathan Whitmore. He did not wave. He did not draw attention to himself. He just sat there, and when Emily glanced back and found him, he gave her the smallest nod, and it was nothing like Ryan's nod. It did not ask her for anything. It just said, "I'm here, beside you." And Emily felt it steady her all the way down to her feet. The judge was a woman named Patricia Reyes, and she had been on the family court bench for 19 years, and she had seen everything, and she had a face that gave away nothing at all. She called the courtroom to order at 9 o'clock sharp, and she looked over the top of her glasses at the two parties before her, and she said, "This is a petition for custody. I've read the filings. I'll hear from the petitioner first. Mr. Mitchell, your counsel may proceed." Ryan's lawyer stood up, and he was smooth. Emily had to give him that. He painted a picture, a father, he said, who had made mistakes in his youth, who deeply regretted the time he had lost, but whose love for his daughter had never wavered. A father who had recently gotten his life together, who was financially stable, who could offer little Lily a good home structure opportunity. And on the other side, he said, gesturing at Emily without quite looking at her, a mother in a precarious situation, unemployed. The subject of, and here he chose his words carefully, considerable public controversy. A woman who had, the lawyer suggested, delicately formed a relationship with a wealthy older man under circumstances that raised real questions about her judgment and her priorities. Emily's face burned, but she kept her chin up exactly as Diane had told her to, and she did not shrink, and she held her daughter, and she waited. It was ugly listening to it. It was a masterpiece of lies dressed up as concern. And for a few minutes it landed. It sounded almost reasonable, and Emily could feel the old fear trying to climb back up her throat. The fear that says, maybe they're right, maybe you're not good enough, maybe you're going to lose everything. And then it was Diane Foster's turn. Diane did not stand up right away. She let the silence sit for a moment after Ryan's lawyer sat down, let the theater of it drain out of the room. And then she rose slowly, and she said, "Your Honor, my opposing counsel has told you a lovely story. I'd like to tell you a true one, and unlike his mine, comes with evidence." She started with the timeline. Cold, simple, undeniable. The date Ryan left. Emily, 6 months pregnant. The date Lily was born with the hospital records showing no father present. No father listed as having visited no father anywhere. And then she walked through the 11 months that followed, month by month, and at the end of each month, she asked the same question in the same flat voice. "And what support did Mr. Mitchell provide in this month, Your Honor?" And each time she answered it herself, "None." "And what contact did Mr. Mitchell have with his daughter in this month?" "None." "And where was Mr. Mitchell in this month?" "We don't know, Your Honor, because he was not anywhere near this child." 11 times. None. 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 Emily watched the judge's face, and it still gave away nothing, but she watched her write something down, and she watched her eyes move just once from the pile of filings to Ryan, and there was something in that glance that had not been there before. Then Diane turned to the internet posts, and she laid them out. The anonymous account and the trace back to Ryan's own email address, done by a forensics expert, whose report she entered into evidence. The escalation. The interviews. And here Diane paused and she said, "Your Honor, my opposing counsel described my client as the subject of public controversy, as though this controversy fell out of the sky. It did not. It was manufactured. By the petitioner. Deliberately. He created it, and then he pointed to it as evidence against her. He set the fire, and then complained about the smoke." And she looked at Ryan when she said it, and Ryan's confident expression had begun just slightly to slip. And then Diane Foster went in for the kill, and she did it so quietly that Emily almost missed the moment the whole case turned. "Your Honor," she said, "the petitioner's entire argument rests on the claim that he is financially stable and prepared to provide a good home, and that his motivation is love for his daughter. I'd like to test both of those claims. First, the finances." And she entered into evidence a financial disclosure obtained lawfully that showed Ryan Mitchell drowning in debt, tens of thousands of dollars, delinquent accounts, a car payment, 3 months behind. "This," Diane said, "is the stable provider. This is the man who told this court under oath in a sworn filing that he could offer this child a better material life than her mother. He cannot offer her anything. He is underwater. He lied to this court." Ryan's lawyer was on his feet objecting, but the judge waved him down and said, "Sit down, counsel. I want to hear the rest of this." And Emily's heart was pounding now because she knew what was coming. She knew what Diane had saved for last. "And now," Diane said, "the question of his motivation, his love for his daughter." She let the word love hang there, contemptuous. "I have here 2 pieces of evidence on that point. The first is a message the petitioner sent to his own attorney obtained through proper channels, in which he refers to this custody claim, and I am quoting, exactly as an easy payday if the rich guy folds. A murmur went through the courtroom. The judge's pen stopped moving. The second, Diane continued, is a recording. A phone call the petitioner made to my client just last week. My client answered as she had every right to do, and recorded it as she had every right to do under the laws of this state. I'd like to play it for the court. I think it speaks better than I ever could. And she pressed play. And Ryan Mitchell's own voice filled the silent courtroom. You've got a billionaire and a baby, and I've got a claim on the baby, and that's worth money, and we both know it. So let's stop pretending this is about anything else and talk numbers. How much is your rich boyfriend willing to pay to make me go away? And then Emily's voice, calm and flat. For what, Ryan? What exactly are you being compensated for? And then Ryan, again, clear as a bell, damning as anything Emily had ever heard. For my leverage, Em. That's what a custody claim is. It's leverage. The recording clicked off, and the courtroom was so quiet you could have heard a pin drop onto the carpet. Emily was watching Ryan, and she saw the exact moment he understood. She saw the confidence drain out of his face like water out of a cracked glass. She saw him turn to his lawyer, and she saw his lawyer refuse to look at him because his lawyer had just heard in Ryan's own voice that the entire case was a shakedown, and a lawyer's own reputation was on the line now, too. She saw Ryan open his mouth and close it again because there was nothing at all that he could say. Judge Patricia Reyes set down her pen. She took off her reading glasses, and she looked at Ryan Mitchell for a long, long moment, and when she finally spoke, her voice was quiet, and it was the most terrible sound Emily had ever heard, because it was the sound of a person who had seen a great many liars and was entirely done being patient with them. Mr. Mitchell, the judge said, I want to make sure I understand your position because I've been doing this a long time, and I want to be fair even now. Is it your testimony that you love your daughter and want custody of her because you believe it's in her best interest? Ryan's lawyer leaned toward him. But Ryan cornered, panicking, made the mistake men like him always make. He tried to talk his way out. Your Honor, that was taken out of context. I was frustrated. I didn't mean... You called her leverage, the judge said. You called your child leverage and a payday, in your own words, in writing and again on a recording. There's no context in the world that redeems that word, Mr. Mitchell. There is no version of loving your daughter that includes calling her leverage. I'm not finished, the judge said, and Ryan closed his mouth. And then Patricia Reyes said something that Emily would carry in her heart for the rest of her life, would repeat to herself on hard days, would one day tell her daughter when Lily was old enough to understand. Parenthood, Val, the judge said, is not a title you get to claim when it becomes convenient. It is not leverage. It is not a payday. It is not a card you play when someone else's fortune improves. Parenthood is what this young woman has been doing quietly alone without help and without recognition for 11 months while you were nowhere to be found. That is parenthood, Mr. Mitchell. What you're doing has a different name, and we both know what it is, and I will not dignify it by pretending otherwise in my courtroom. She put her glasses back on. This petition is denied, she said. Full physical and legal custody remains with the mother, Emily Carter, where it has effectively been since the day this child was born. Mr. Mitchell, you are not being denied a relationship with your daughter, but you are going to have to earn it, and it is going to be on this court's terms and hers, not yours. Any visitation will be supervised, and it will be contingent on you completing parenting classes, on you establishing a documented record of financial responsibility, on you paying the child support you have owed for 11 months, and on this court being satisfied over time that you have any interest in this child at all beyond her utility to you. And I will tell you plainly, based on what I have heard today, I have my doubts. She paused, and then she added in a voice that had turned to iron. And Ms. Foster, I understand there may be separate matters regarding the defamation of your client. This court has no jurisdiction over that, but I would encourage your client to pursue whatever remedies are available to her, and if a record of these proceedings would be useful in that pursuit, this court will make it available. Mr. Mitchell, you have done real harm to this woman's name, and you did it in writing, and where I come from, that has a way of coming back around. She struck her gavel once. We're adjourned, and it was over. Emily sat there for a moment, unable to move Lily warm against her chest, and it did not feel real. It did not feel real that after all the fear, all the sleepless nights, all the terror of losing, the only thing that mattered, it had come down to this, to Ryan's own words, in his own voice, to the truth simply being allowed to speak. She had won. She had kept her daughter. And she had done it herself, standing on her own 2 feet with the truth she had gathered, and the receipts she had saved, and the neighbors who had stood up, and the lawyer who did not lose, and a man in the back of the room who had never once stepped in front of her. She turned around. Nathan was still sitting in the back row. And he was not smiling triumphantly, not gloating, not doing anything at all except looking at her with an expression she had never quite seen on anyone's face before, a kind of quiet, fierce pride, the look of a person watching someone become exactly who they were always meant to be. And he gave her the smallest nod, and Emily understood everything that nod meant. It meant that was you, not me. You did that. And it meant I told you the truth was on your side, and it meant I'm glad I got to watch. Across the aisle, Ryan Mitchell was gathering his things, and his lawyer was already halfway to the door, wanting nothing more to do with him, and Ryan looked for the first time since Emily had known him small. Deflated. A man whose whole game had been called, and who had lost it in front of everyone. He glanced at Emily, and she braced for one last cruel word. But instead, something strange happened. Ryan looked at her, and then his eyes dropped to Lily. Really looked at the baby, maybe for the first time since he had walked back into their lives, and for just a second, just 1 second, Emily thought she saw something cross his face that was not calculation, was not greed, was something almost like shame. Almost like the ghost of the man he might have been if he had ever once chosen to be. And then it was gone, and he turned and walked out of the courtroom without a word, and Emily watched him go, and she waited to feel triumphant, and instead she just felt tired and sad and free. Diane Foster was packing up her briefcase, and she looked over at Emily, and for once the sharp, dry lawyer let something soft show on her face. "You did well in there," Diane said. "You held your chin up the whole time. You didn't shrink. You didn't apologize." She snapped the briefcase shut. "I've represented a lot of mothers over 31 years, Emily. Some of them came from money, some from nothing, some had every advantage, and some had none. And I'll tell you something, the ones who win aren't the ones with the most. They're the ones who don't break. You didn't break, not once. That baby is lucky to have you." Emily's eyes filled. "I couldn't have done it without you, or without—" She glanced toward the back of the room. "You could have," Diane said firmly. "That's the thing you still don't quite believe, and you need to start believing it. We gave you a fair fight, that's all. We made sure you weren't fighting with your hands tied. But the standing up, the not breaking, the keeping every receipt and answering every call and telling the truth with your chin up, that was all you. Don't ever let anyone, including that good man in the back, or even yourself, tell you otherwise." She put a hand on Emily's arm. "You keep that. You're going to need it. Life's not done throwing things at you. Nothing ever is. But now you know what you're made of. That changes everything." Emily walked out of the courtroom into the wide marble hallway, and Nathan was waiting there off to the side, giving her space. Always giving her space. And she walked over to him, and for a moment, neither of them said anything. "You didn't say a word the whole time," Emily said finally. "It wasn't my place to say a word," Nathan said. "It was yours, and you said all the right ones." He looked at Lily, who had woken up and was blinking at the bright hallway, and he smiled. "How's she doing?" "She slept through the whole thing," Emily said. "Slept through her own custody battle. And she laughed a real laugh, the first one in weeks, and it surprised her how good it felt, how it came from somewhere deep that had been locked shut for a long time." "That's exactly how it should be," Nathan said. "She should never have to know how close it got. That's the whole point, right? You fought so she'd never have to." And Emily looked at him, this quiet man who had shown up at midnight with 2 cans of formula and had, without ever taking anything over, without ever making her feel small, changed the entire direction of her life, and she understood something she had been circling for weeks without quite landing on. "You know what the strangest part is?" she said. "That first night when you texted back and said, 'Send me your address,' I almost didn't. I almost said no. Everything in me said, don't trust him. Don't open the door, it's not safe. And I only did it because Lily was hungry, and I was out of options. She shook her head. One choice. If I'd said no that night, none of this happens. You never come. I never meet Diane. I probably lose Lily to Ryan because I'd have been alone and scared and I'd have folded. My whole life turned on whether I opened one door at midnight. Nathan was quiet for a moment, and then he said, my whole life turned on whether a stranger knocked on a car window in Detroit 30 years ago. That's how it works, Emily. The biggest things turn on the smallest choices. A wrong number, a knocked window, a door you almost didn't open. He looked at her. The trick is just being the kind of person who opens the door and being the kind of person who knocks. That's the whole thing. That's everything. And you're both now. You always were. You just needed a night dark enough to find out. Emily did not know what to say to that, so she did not say anything. She just stood there in the marble hallway with her daughter in her arms and this man beside her, and she let herself feel for the first time in longer than she could remember. Something that was not fear, was not exhaustion, was not the constant low grinding worry of a person barely holding on. She felt safe, not because someone had saved her, but because she finally understood that she could not be broken as easily as she had always believed. They walked out of the courthouse together into the cold, bright morning, and Emily carried Lily down the wide stone steps, and at the bottom, she stopped, and she turned her face up to the pale winter sun, and she closed her eyes and she breathed. Behind her, the doors of the courthouse where she had just won back her whole life. Beside her, a man who had taught her the difference between being rescued and being backed up. And in her arms, warm and safe and completely oblivious, the daughter she had kept, the daughter no one was ever going to take from her, the daughter she had fought for and won. She thought about the woman she had been that first night sitting in the dark with $9 and an empty formula can, so certain she was alone, so certain the world had nothing left to offer her but cruelty. And she wished she could reach back through time and tell that woman what she knew now, that help was coming, that she was stronger than she believed, that the door she was so afraid to open led not to danger, but to the beginning of everything. But she could not reach that woman. So instead, she made a promise to another one, to the little girl in her arms who would grow up someday and face her own dark nights, her own impossible choices, her own moments of sitting alone in the dark, certain there was no way through. I'm going to teach you, Emily whispered into her daughter's hair, too quiet for Nathan to hear. I'm going to teach you everything I just learned, that you're stronger than you think, that it's okay to let people help you, that the worst nights are the ones that change everything, and that no matter how dark it gets, baby, no matter how alone you feel, you open the door, you always open the door. And Lily, as if she understood, reached up one tiny hand and pressed it against her mother's cheek. And Emily Carter, who had begged a stranger for $50 on the worst night of her life and had somehow impossibly ended up here, held her daughter close and started walking toward whatever came next. She did not know yet all the things that were coming. She did not know about the phone call she would get in a few weeks, or the door that would open for her that she never could have imagined, or the way her whole life was about to become something she had never once dared to dream of. She did not know that the story was not ending here, that in some ways it was only just beginning. All she knew walking down those courthouse steps with the sun on her face and her daughter in her arms and a good man beside her was that she had walked in that morning afraid of losing everything, and she was walking out having kept the only thing that ever mattered, and that for today was more than enough. The phone call came 3 weeks after the courtroom on an ordinary Thursday afternoon, and it changed everything all over again. Emily was folding laundry when Nathan called, and she answered, expecting the usual a check in a how's Lily, the easy rhythm they had fallen into. But his voice was different this time. There was something careful in it, something almost nervous, which was strange because Emily had never once heard Nathan Whitmore sound nervous. I want to talk to you about something, he said, and I need you to hear the whole thing before you say no, because I know you and I know your first word is going to be no. So just let me get it all out first. Can you do that? Emily set down the shirt she was folding. Now I'm worried. Don't be. It's a good thing. I think it's a good thing. He took a breath. There's a woman I know who runs a community program here in Columbus, helps single mothers who are struggling, job training, financial literacy, childcare, while they get on their feet, that kind of thing. It's a good program. It does real work. But it's small and it's underfunded, and the woman who runs it is retiring and it's about to fall apart, which would be a shame because there are a lot of women out there right now sitting in the dark with an empty formula can and $9, and this program is the door some of them need. Emily's chest tightened. Okay, I want to fund it, properly, enough to grow it to reach more women to actually make a dent. He paused. And I want you to run it. Emily was silent. I told you not to say no yet, Nathan said quickly. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking I'm a hotel housekeeper. I'm not qualified. Why would he give this to me? Is this charity dressed up as a job? And I want to answer all of that before you decide. So, can I— Go ahead, Emily said quietly. You're not qualified on paper, Nathan said. That's true. You don't have the degree, you don't have the resume. But Emily, listen to me. Every single woman who walks through that door is going to be sitting exactly where you sat 6 months ago, scared, ashamed, certain she's alone, certain that asking for help makes her weak. And you know what I've learned, building companies, hiring thousands of people. You can teach almost anything. You can teach the paperwork, the budgets, the systems. What you cannot teach, what is rarer than any degree, is a person who has actually been in that dark room and climbed out of it and can look another woman in the eye and say, I know exactly where you are because I was there and here is the door. You have something no qualification on earth can give you. You have been her. That's not why you're not qualified for this job. That's why you're the only person truly qualified for it. Emily's eyes were burning. But people will say— I know what people will say, Nathan cut in gently. They'll say the billionaire gave his girlfriend a job. I know. And here's the thing, Emily, I don't care, and you're going to have to stop caring too. Because you cannot live your whole life letting Ryan Mitchell and a bunch of strangers on the internet decide what you're allowed to do with your one life. You already learned that in that courtroom. You held your chin up while they lied about you, and you won anyway. This is the same lesson. Let them talk. You go do the work. And in a year when there are 200 women who got back on their feet because of you, nobody's going to be talking about how you got the job. They're going to be talking about what you did with it. Emily was quiet for a long time, and when she finally spoke, her voice was thick. You really believe I can do this? Emily, Nathan said, I have never been more sure of anything. I watched you fight for your daughter with nothing but the truth and your own 2 feet. I watched you refuse my money over and over because you'd rather do it yourself than owe anybody. You think I'm doing you a favor here. I'm not. I'm making the smartest hire of my life, and I'm getting the better end of it, and someday you'll understand that. And so Emily said yes, not because it was charity, because for the first time someone had looked at the very thing she had been most ashamed of the darkest night of her life, and told her it was not a weakness to hide, but a strength to build a life on. And that changed something in her that no amount of money ever could have. She started slow. She was terrified at first, in over her head, drowning in paperwork and budgets and systems she did not understand. There were nights she called Nathan certain she had made a terrible mistake, certain she was going to fail, certain everyone had been right about her. And every time Nathan said the same thing. He never said, I'll fix it. He never once offered to step in and take it over. He said, what did you learn today? Okay, now you know that. What's the next thing? Beside her, never in front of her. He made her figure it out, and so she figured it out. And slowly she got good at it, and then she got better than good, because it turned out Nathan was right. The women who came through that door did not need someone with a fancy degree talking down at them. They needed someone who understood. And when Emily sat across from a young mother who could not meet her eyes, a woman clutching a baby and drowning in shame, and Emily said quietly, I know, I was you. I sat in the dark with $9 and an empty can of formula, and I was so sure I was alone. And I promise you, you're not— Something happened in that room that no professional could have manufactured. The woman looked up, and she saw someone who had actually been there, and she believed maybe for the first time that climbing out was possible, because here was living proof of it sitting right across the table. Word spread. Not the ugly kind this time, the real kind. Women told other women. This place is different, they said. The lady who runs it, she's been through it, she gets it. She doesn't make you feel small. Within a year, the program had tripled the number of women it served. Within 2, Emily was training other formerly struggling mothers to become counselors themselves, building a whole chain of women who had climbed out, reaching back to pull up the ones still down there in the dark. She learned the budgets. She learned to fundraise, and she was extraordinary at it, because when Emily Carter stood up in a room full of donors and told the story of a wrong number and a stranger at midnight and what it had done for her, there was not a dry eye in the house, and the checks that followed built something real. And through all of it, Nathan was there, beside her, never in front. Their relationship changed slowly, the way the best things do, without either of them forcing it. It had started as a stranger's kindness and become a partnership, and somewhere along the way, so gradually that Emily could not have named the day it happened, it had become something more. There was no dramatic moment, no grand declaration. There was just the slow, steady accumulation of 1,000 small things. Nathan showing up to Lily's first birthday party, sitting on the floor in his expensive clothes, helping a 1-year-old smash a cake. Nathan learning how Emily took her coffee without being told. Emily realizing one day that Nathan's laugh, that rare, real laugh, had become the sound she looked forward to most in her week. He never rushed her. That was the thing about him. He had waited patiently, the same way he had waited at the end of that hallway on the first night, giving her all the space in the world, letting her come to it in her own time, letting it be her choice. Because Nathan Whitmore had understood something about Emily from the very first night that most people never understood at all, that the fastest way to lose her was to try to take anything from her, and the only way to earn her was to stand beside her and wait. One evening, about 18 months after the courtroom, they were sitting on the floor of Emily's apartment, a nicer apartment now, one she paid for herself with her own salary, and Lily was asleep in the next room, and Nathan was quiet, in a way that made Emily look up from her paperwork. "What?" she said. "I've been thinking," Nathan said, "about the first night, about how you almost didn't send me your address." "I think about that all the time," Emily admitted. "I think about it too, because I've been trying to figure out why I got in the car." He turned the coffee mug in his hands. "I've gotten 1,000 messages over the years. Requests appeals people wanting things. My whole life is people wanting things. And I have a foundation that handles it and systems, and I almost never get personally involved because you can't, you drown. But that night I read your message, this stranger asking for $50 for formula, and something about it it got me out of my chair. And I've been trying to understand what it was." "And did you figure it out?" "I think so," Nathan said. "It was the way you apologized. You said, 'I know how embarrassing this is, and I hate that I even have to ask.' You were mortified. You were begging for the smallest amount of money, $50, nothing, and you were falling all over yourself apologizing for it. And I thought, this is not someone trying to work an angle. This is someone who is genuinely out of options and genuinely ashamed to need help, which meant this was someone who had probably always been the one giving help, never taking it. And I know that person. I was raised by that person. My mother was exactly that person." He looked at her. "So I got in the car, because I recognized you. Before I ever met you, I recognized you." Emily's throat was tight. "And you were right about me." "I was right about you," Nathan said softly. "Every single thing I hoped when I got in that car turned out to be true, and then 100 things I never even imagined. You know what the best part of my life is now? Emily, it's not the company, it's not the money, it never was, but it especially isn't now. The best part of my life is that a woman texted the wrong number one night, and I answered, and it turned out to be the most right thing that ever happened to me." And Emily, sitting on the floor of the apartment she had earned herself next to the man who had taught her, she was strong with her daughter, safe and asleep in the next room, understood that her whole life had turned on the smallest possible thing, and that the smallest things were in the end the only things that ever really mattered. They married in the spring, a small wedding, nothing extravagant because neither of them wanted extravagant. Mrs. Alvarez was there, and the neighbors who had stood up for Emily when the whole city turned against her, and Diane Foster, who cried, which no one who knew her would have believed possible. And Lily, 2 years old now, walking and laughing and healthy, toddled down the aisle in a tiny dress, and fell down halfway and laughed about it, and it was the most perfect wedding anyone there had ever seen. Ryan Mitchell was not there, of course, but his story, it turned out, was not quite finished, and its ending said everything. He had in the end done exactly what the court required, or started to. He had gone to a few of the parenting classes. He had made a couple of the supervised visits, and Emily had watched carefully, warily, ready to protect Lily at the first sign of danger. But the visits had been awkward and hollow, and after a few months, Ryan had simply stopped coming. He had stopped showing up. The classes, the visits, the child support, all of it, had quietly petered out, because in the end, there had never been any money in it for him. And once he understood that Nathan was never going to pay him off, once he understood that the payday was never coming, his interest in his daughter evaporated exactly as fast as it had appeared. And that, Emily realized, was the most honest thing Ryan Mitchell had ever done. He had shown everyone plainly that the judge had been right about him from the first day, that it had never once been about Lily, that a child had only ever been to him exactly what he'd called her: leverage, a payday. And when there was no payday to be had, there was no father to be found. Emily did not hate him for it in the end. She had expected to, but somewhere along the way, the hate had just burned off because she was too busy building something to carry it anymore, and because Ryan's absence, which had once been the great wound of her life, had turned out to be a gift. He had removed himself. He had made the choice for all of them, and Lily would grow up without the poison of a father who saw her as a bargaining chip, and would grow up instead with a mother who had fought for her, and a stepfather who had chosen her, actually chosen her over and over in 1,000 small ways, which was worth more than all the biology in the world. Because that was the thing Emily came to understand, the deepest thing, the thing she would spend the rest of her life teaching the women who came through her door. Family is not the people who happen to be tied to you. Family is not a title you can claim when it becomes convenient, exactly as the judge had said. Family is the people who show up. It's the people who stand beside you in the dark. It's the stranger who knocks on the car window, and the stranger who answers the wrong number, and the neighbors who bring covered dishes when the whole world has decided to hate you. Family is a choice made over and over in 1,000 small moments by people who did not have to, and did anyway. Ryan had been given every chance to choose, and he had chosen leverage. Nathan had never been obligated to choose anything, and he had chosen Emily and Lily freely, completely, again and again. And that was the whole difference. That was everything. Years passed. The program Emily ran became one of the most respected of its kind in the state, and then it grew beyond the state, a model that other cities copied, and thousands of women, thousands climbed out of their own dark rooms with Emily's hand reaching down to help pull them up. She testified before the state legislature about supporting single mothers. She was given awards she was too busy to attend the ceremonies for. And every single time anyone asked her the secret, how she had built something so effective, so different, so real, she gave the same answer. "I remember what it felt like," she would say. "I remember sitting in the dark with an empty can of formula, so ashamed to ask for help that I almost let my daughter go hungry rather than pick up the phone. And someone taught me that needing help doesn't make you weak. That's the whole thing. That's everything we do here. We just tell women what a stranger once told me, and then we stand beside them while they figure out the rest." One evening, many years after that first cold night, Emily stood in the doorway of the family support center she had built, watching the last of the day's mothers gather their children and head home, some of them lighter than when they'd come in, some of them with the first hope they'd felt in months. And Nathan came up beside her, older now gray coming in at his temples, and he put his arm around her, and they watched together. "You know what I still can't believe," Emily said, "after all these years?" "What's that?" "That I accidentally texted a billionaire to ask for $50. She laughed, and it was the same laugh from the courthouse steps, free and real. $50, that's all I wanted. $50 to get through the week. Nathan smiled, the rare, real smile, the one that had become the sound she looked forward to most. "And I still can't believe," he said, "that after everything, after the company and the money and all of it, the best thing I ever did with any of it was answer a wrong number in the middle of the night." Emily leaned her head against his shoulder. And Lily, a teenager, now tall and healthy and laughing, came out of the center calling for them, wanting to know if they were ready to go home. And Emily looked at her daughter. The baby she had fought for, the baby no one had ever managed to take from her, grown now into a bright and confident girl who had never once in her life gone to sleep hungry, who had never once known the fear her mother had carried, because her mother had taken that fear and turned it into a fortress that would shelter not just her, but thousands of other people's daughters too. "I wasn't asking for money that night," Emily said quietly, watching her daughter. "I've thought about it for years, and that's the thing I finally understood. I typed $50, but that's not what I was really asking for. I was asking for someone to see me, to not look away, to decide I was worth the trouble." "I know," Nathan said. "I knew it the second I read it." "I was asking for a chance," Emily said. And Nathan pulled her closer. And the three of them, the family that had been built not from blood, but from choice, from a wrong number, and an open door, and 1,000 small decisions to show up, walked out together into the evening. Emily Carter had spent the worst night of her life, certain she was alone, certain the world had nothing left to give her, certain that reaching out for help was the last humiliation of a life full of them. She had been wrong about every part of it. She had not been alone. The world had been full of good people she'd been too afraid to let in, and reaching out had not been her humiliation. It had been her salvation, and more than that, it had been the beginning of her becoming the strongest version of herself, the version that would go on to save thousands of others. She was never rescued that night. That was the truth she had learned, and the truth she carried, and the truth she gave away to every frightened woman who walked through her door. Nobody had rescued her. A stranger had simply reminded her on the darkest night she had ever known that one small act of kindness can open a door, and she had been strong enough to walk through it herself.